What up, Cagesiders? Me, Sean Rueter, manager, writer of things, editor, but not of my own stuff that often. At CagesideSeats.com. This is a little, getting dangerously close to actually doing it weekly. A video cast series that I like to call like a House of Fire because everything else was taken, so that's what we call it. And it is me, Sean Rueter, at S1Root on Twitter, more often found, like I said, here at CagesideSeats.com, best damn pro wrestling site on the internet. And that's that's what they call me. That's where I work, and this is what I do every once in a while. So, what was kicking around for me this weekend, doing one on a weekend here, is it's been a crappy. Let's just go ahead and say it. It's been a shitty week for WWE. And it's been a tough week for folks like me, who you know, try our best to divorce the entertainment value that we get from the product and the love of the stories and the performers that we have from the wrestling's often sordid, well, completely sordid history in terms of you know drug use and how workers are treated and that kind of stuff. And we're all too often reminded that that is not ancient history too. And this week has been a lot of that. We had the Give Divas a Chance thing last week, which I talked about in the last one of these, which it seems to be having at least some short-term positive benefits in terms of you know the ladies getting more of a chance to work on Raw, and so we'll see. I mean, they're turning it into a storyline, which it's always going to happen, but the Bill Demott stuff down in NXT is the kind of stuff that, I mean, it just boggles the mind on a couple of different levels. One of which is that anybody would do that, um, and I don't just mean Demott. I mean that people would put up with it. I mean that other people would cover it up, and also just that it would be allowed to go on in a publicly traded company that that Vince McMahon says he's in the entertainment business and he's holding conference calls with Wall Street investors, and to have for anyone in that organization to hear these reports and to not do anything other than let Bill DeMott investigate himself or whatever is, I mean, wow. And then you reap what you sow. They're getting the PR that they deserve from that. There was a piece in the Washington Post. So even though DeMott stepped down, we might not have heard the last of that because people seem to be um, emboldened by his resignation a little bit to come out with more stories, and that's gonna, people may start to look a little bit deeper at who covered that up and who got pushed out as a result of it, and it could get uglier before it gets better. So, but it's just another reminder that this is the culture that we, if you dig a little bit beneath the surface of the WWE, we keep getting examples of this, and the stuff that went down last year with Alberto Del Rio, now Alberto El Patron, sort of a culture of racism, um, or it is racism. I mean, I'm sure it would be defended as jokes or just racial insensitivity, but if you get right down to it, the track record speaks for itself. I mean, there are no Latinos in prominent positions right now. The African American workers are working caricature gimmicks and are not getting getting a push. And the argument can and has been made that maybe the crop they have right now isn't the most talented. They're not going to be main eventers, but maybe they could be in a different circumstance. I think Kofi Kingston could have continued a bit of a rise from when he was feuding with Randy Orton a few years back. But that's, I mean, it's the point being, without diving back into all that stuff, the point being that a lot of this stuff is pretty depressing to think about, that these performers who entertain us and who that we I mean, love might be too strong a word. Sometimes it might not be, but who we identify with and we root for, and that's both in the storyline level and on a personal level. I think that's a lot of what it means to be a smart fan, is that we're rooting for the performer behind the character as well as the character itself, which is another thing that makes this wrestling game, fascinating and unique, and it's part of what I love about it. Um, but like I said, so a lot of this Demott stuff is bringing up things that make it harder to love the biggest company in the history of this business that I love, which is WWE. So Um, Part of it, as it being my job and that's the company that pays the bills, I'm not going to stop watching, but I probably wouldn't anyway, which, is my ongoing sort of guilt, Catholic guilt, kind of Jewish guilt, whatever kind of spiritual guilt you want to have about it. If I go to the church of wrestling, I feel a little bit bad about um, making offerings to WWE. That's a weird metaphor. Let's try not to do that again. Anyway, so what I wanted to do quickly is run down what the landscape is. What are our options? Because we do have a lot of options these days, and WWE isn't going anywhere. Um, I posted a really well done fan video called "The Rise and Fall of WWE" this week, where the guy spliced together clips from the Monday Night War series and things like that, some of WWE's hatchet jobs on WCW, and put them over current WWE storylines to see how the critiques that they always levy at WCW are things that they're doing right now, which it's a really smart piece. If you haven't watched it, I'll put the link down there. Click on it. But unfortunately, they're sort of too big to fail at this point. I think the network is a really smart decision. Vince has a way of pulling one of those out of his keister every once in a while, and it's gonna sustain it. It's good because it sustains their monopoly because it makes it harder for other people to make money in the business. Because if you're paying your $10 a month to WWE, and you're getting all this stuff, you're getting the pay-per-views and everything else, you're that much less likely to spend $35 on a Ring of Honor pay-per-view like we had last weekend, or those sorts of things. So, but that being said, I think WWE for the foreseeable future, 10, 20 years probably, barring something catastrophic, is not going anywhere and will remain as the top dog. But so what are our choices as fans? Just because, TNA or somebody isn't going to overtake WWE doesn't mean we can't watch them. So let's start there. TNA gets a really bad rap, especially in the internet wrestling communities, and deservedly so. They have burnt a lot of fans a lot of times. The stuff that went on when they brought in Hogan and Bischoff is comical, and not in a way that you want to watch it again because it's funny, but in terms of watching a train wreck kind of a thing. So they've got a lot of they got to make it up to a lot of people, and some of those folks are never convinced to come back because they came back several times and they kept getting burned. But from what I've seen of the product lately, and this is before the end of their Spike TV run and the beginning of their Destination America run, they're doing some good stuff. They're still doing some LOL TNA stuff. I think we're in the middle of a big Kurt Angle push because that guy's hot young act that we got to take care of him, which is weird. When they've got some legitimately guys that could be pretty hot young acts. I think Bram is going places. EC3 is that's a good character, and that guy plays it to the hilt. Rockstar Spud. I mean, he's not going to be somebody that's ever gonna be convincing as your top wrestler, but he's a hell of a wrestling character performer. So they got some guys there that they could be pushing, and I don't know that they might be making some of the mistakes there again, but it's not as bad. It's not any worse than your average episode of Raw or SmackDown. And if they can get folks to give it a chance to seek it out, find it, which is a challenge with Destination America, they're still going to be around for a couple, 3 years at least on this contract and their foreign contracts, and they could do some interesting things. Stuff like Samoa Joe leaving does not help them at all. It enhances that image that it's a sinking ship, and why would you invest time in watching it? So we'll see. They've got a real uphill climb, and I think part of the problem is that this is such a good time that cat people, say hi, Nessie. This is such a good market. There's so many choices that they lost momentum right when other people were picking it up. One of those is Ring of Honor, where Samoa Joe went. Their big problem is that Sinclair Broadcasting doesn't seem to want to put any money into the product, so we're left with they had a national pay-per-view last Sunday night. Pretty good show, fun show. Again, they are not without their booking problems. The more I think about the main event, the more it pisses me off. They're also sort of not pushing the right guys, I don't think, right now, which is weird. They're doing it sort of the opposite problem that TNA has, as I really think, you watch an ROH show and you see guys like AJ Styles and Samoa Joe and Jay Lethal and Alberto El Patron, the guy who used to be Del Rio, and they're not fighting for the top belt. So, I mean, Jay Briscoe is a hell of a performer. He's Gino's favorite promo. Um, but he wouldn't be my top guy for a bunch of reasons. And the other guys around him, I like Tommaso Ciampa a lot, but he's gotten injured again. And I don't know that he moves the needle. Michael Elgin is a good hand. He's a good worker, but again, not the same thing. And Warbeard, whatever. Those they're and some for some. But to get back to the point, they can't really. I guess they can't push AJ and El Patron because they don't know they're sort of there on a temporary basis. So Ring of Honor's in this weird place where they're kind of an indie super show, um, but they're also trying to be an ongoing promotion that can play on the same level as TNA and those people. So they're kind of in between. The Sinclair problem, I think, part of it is the lack of money, is that they can't get somebody like AJ or Joe to commit to them long term, and semi exclusively. Um, it also shows up in the production quality, which is what I was getting to with the Sunday pay-per-views. It doesn't look great. Doesn't look terrible, doesn't look great. It looks like, they're in smaller venues. You can tell the lighting's not great. Um, but they're interesting. I think they're always gonna have a spot in a lot of people's hearts. They're the place that Bryan came from. They're the Daniel Bryan. They're the place that CM Punk came from. They're the place that Seth Rollins came from. And they have embraced that relationship with WWE where, they are sort of the feeder system. So they're not going anywhere. Good options. They have their own problems too, though. Um, the other one, the one that's really interesting right now that I think has a lot of that has definitely taken up the cool factor, where that I think TNA might have had at one point if they hadn't chased trying to be WWE with Hogan and Bischoff, is Lucha Underground and AAA out of Mexico, which just recently brought Rey Mysterio back into the fold, which is a splashy signing. I mean, it's interesting. You look at that AAA press conference from last week, and you got three guys that were sort of driven out of WWE for different reasons, but they're three of the top Latino stars in the world, and they couldn't hack it in the WWE environment. I don't mean hack it like they weren't good enough or they were too weak to put up with things or whatever. I mean, just they chose to not be there dealing with that. Um, this is something that this cat does, so enjoy that, everybody. Um, so yeah, so they're an interesting position. I mean, they can tap into a huge market in North America, a growing market in the States. And Lucha Underground, like I said, that's a cool product. I don't know if you haven't been able to get eyes on it, try to somehow, some way, because it feels different. It is, it takes full advantage of being pre-taped and being able to script things out in advance and only being an hour a week. But every hour, there's nothing wasted. They have cool looking and feeling backstage vignettes. They've got, kind of a mix of old school wrestling feuds, like what's going on with King Cuerno and Johnny Mundo, or what had gone on with Johnny Mundo, who used to be John Morrison in WWE. This is amazing. I hope everybody really enjoys this. Um, this is what she does all the time. Morrison and Prince Puma, who was Ricochet on the Indies. So those are sort of old school, like we want to be champ feuds. And then they also have some real Lucha Libre influence, telenovela stuff. Get down with, where there might be mystical forces, and there's femme fatales, and there's weird things locked in the basement. And so it's a really interesting show, though. And it's not work rate bonanza. I mean, it's lucha, so it's a lot of acrobatics, but they mix in other styles. It's just a really different feeling product, and it's one that I could talk about for a long time, because I think they're doing some cool stuff, and they've got Robert Rodriguez behind it, who's the Tarantino's sometimes filmmaking partner, out of Austin, does it all, does his own cinematography, musician, producer, blah blah blah, but also somebody who I think has a good sense of, this is something different, this is something cool. It can kind of feel like a dressed up B movie, like a lot of his films and Tarantino's can. So it's a cool product. It's out there. It's tied into AAA, which, Alberto El Patron has been on there. Mysterio's going to be on there, so they can bring in some of that feel. And that might be, a feeder that this is a cool hour-long self-contained series. But if you're interested in this, if they start to bring their other shows to the U.S. market, and they tap into the growing Latino market, and they get some non-Latinos to check it out, that could be interesting. You know, it, I was thinking the other, the company that could conceivably really take down WWE would be some sort of if if AAA and New Japan linked up, which New Japan has a partnership with the other big Mexican promotion, CMLL. So that's probably not going to happen. But those two, I mean, they've got some interesting things going on with the New Japan service, and then Lucha Underground in the States, and New Japan's Access TV deal. So, I mean, New Japan is another one. I think they're sort of a step behind AAA because of the lack of Lucha Underground. I think that product is making some headway that I don't think New Japan is doing with their Access show. But New Japan is sort of going after a different market. They're going after that MMA. There's the strong style market with that Access deal that shows on a night full of other MMA programming. So I mean, maybe that's not. I mean, maybe both of those companies could do it on their own. I think they're to me the most interesting options, even more than Ring of Honor or TNA, just because it's a different product altogether. They both work in English speaking performers, in addition to their native performers, Latinos and mostly Mexicans for AAA and Japanese for New Japan. So I mean, those are both interesting options. It's then you've got the rest of the indies under there. I mean, I was just thinking the other day, I'm a little bit disappointed that Chikara didn't. It seemed like they had some good buzz going when they went away for a while, and they worked that storyline where Icarus came back and won the title, and it seems like they've just settled back into where they were, or maybe even a little bit below, which might be something to do with their financial problems that they had that led to them going away for a year. So that's a little bit disappointing, but those companies are still out there, and they're always going to be out there. I don't know. I haven't really kept up with Evolve, but they're interesting as well. They have they have an app that plays on Apple TVs. I don't know if it plays on Apple TV. I know it plays on the Roku that I have. So there's a way to stream a lot of their shows to your television. But again, you're competing for a limited dollar, and I don't know that. I think the realistic options to really survive a long time and really be more than just a feeder system to some bigger companies are AAA, New Japan, TNA, and ROH. And like I said, I think the most interesting to me is the foreign companies there. So and then somewhere in there you've got Jeff Jarrett still out there running his mouth about Global Force, saying they're going to have their own shows based out of Vegas. I feel like that's sort of like TNA, similarly to the company that he helped found. I feel like they kind of missed the boat on that. That could have been something if he had been able to pull it off last year. But I think it might be a little. I mean, you might be trying to play catch up with some companies that have been, like I said, and again, I'm mostly talking about New Japan and AAA here because I think they're doing interesting things that I think really appeal to people with a mix of what you can expect out of WWE and what people like out of WWE mixed in with some things that people are frustrating that WWE doesn't offer. So frustrated. So that's sort of my survey of the pro wrestling landscape. Like I said, I don't see anything changing in the short term, but it's a good time to be a fan if you are really frustrated with WWE and some of the more troubling sort of social aspects of their presentation, the how openly they contradict their own public relations efforts with Be a Star and things, how they treat women and minority characters. There are options out there, so it's a good time. If you're not like me and you don't, make a few bucks writing about NXT and Raw every once in a while and you don't have to watch it, you got options. And that's the only way WWE is ever going to change is if things start to impact their bottom line. So that's my 2 cents there. We'll talk more about. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk more about Mania and less about Bill DeMott as we get closer to WrestleMania. I mean, that card is interesting, but we'll talk more about that in future editions of this. And I think we're trying to maybe even get Mr. Morosco back on one of these deals. Maybe we'll do a WrestleMania pre-show with me and Matt Roth and him. And I don't know. We'll see. I don't want to make any promises, but that's a possibility. Anyway, geez, I talked for a long time. That's 20 minutes. Whew. Thanks for sticking with me if you made it this long. And yeah, believe that.